Well, welcome back. Day 2, creating lasting change, the 7 master steps for maximum impact. Our mission, become more effective leaders, become agents of change, be able to step into any situation and make a difference. Well, yesterday I dumped the whole load on you. How'd you hold up? Did you do your homework? Did you take a little time to capture and be honest with yourself about which of the 6 human needs are the driving force for you, which are the top 2? Because they guide you. They affect you more than almost anything else. Did you take a look at what are some of the areas of your life that you're really pleased with? And what is happening in your life? How do your life conditions match your blueprint? Did you take a look at some places where you're not so thrilled? And did you notice where the difference was? How your life conditions don't quite equal your blueprint or maybe fall short of that? And did you make any decisions about what you need to change in your life conditions or in your blueprint? If not, if you want to influence other people, I know it's tough on yourself, but you might be a good place to start. Today, we're going to lay the foundation very quickly for the 7 master steps. These steps that will help you create lasting change in anyone you want to have an impact on. In fact, what I can promise you, if you follow these steps and you really are committed to them, you're consistent in their approach, you're not going to bump into anything you're not going to be able to help break the pattern on or help someone make a change with. You really will be an effective agent of change. And again, that's proven over 3 decades in just about every kind of environment you can imagine, from sports to politics to working with scientists or business people, prisoners, children, you name it. So it does take creativity. The art of your contribution as a leader or a change agent is going to be what you bring to the table. What I want to bring to you is a format that can kind of guide you. And so I want to answer 2 questions here. First, what do you really need to know to help anybody really make a lasting change? And there are 3 things. The first thing you have to know, whether you're working with a friend or an associate or want to make a difference with your kids, or you're a therapist or you're working with somebody that you're managing, always, if you want to have an impact, the first thing you have to understand is, what does this person need and what do they want? Now, here's the good news. If you don't know what somebody needs and wants, what are your chances of influencing them? Remember the fundamental principle I brought up yesterday? To influence someone else, you have to know what already influences them. If I try to convince you to do something and I start telling you things that you disagree with, that you don't believe, you're going to shut me down in a heartbeat. If you don't do it verbally or directly, you're going to do it in your head. If you're going to be able to arrive at influencing someone, leading someone, you've got to enter their world. You can't enter the world unless you understand it a bit. Now, here's the good news. You already know what people need. We've described 6 human needs that are universal. Everybody needs all 6. What are they? Certainty, you remember. Uncertainty or variety. Significance, feeling unique, special, important, feeling needed. The feeling of connection and love. And then the primary needs, the needs of the spirit. We must grow and we must contribute. And remember, everybody meets the first 4 needs. And if they work harder or if they have to lie to themselves, but very few people meet the final 2 where fulfillment really shows up. So we know what needs they're after. What we really want to know is, what do they want? And people speak in codes. So if you said to somebody, okay, well, what do you really want? And they say, well, I want to make $1 billion. You instantly know which of the 6 needs they value most. What need structure is most important to that person? If they say, I want to make $1 billion, not hard to figure out. Significance with a capital S. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. That's what's driving them. If somebody else says, well, what's most important to me is getting control of my life and just I feel like I'm out of control. I want to feel like I know what's going to happen and how it's going to happen and not have so much uncertainty in my life. Then clearly, what is that person's driving need? Certainty. So you get the sense of this. So when someone tells you what they want, they start to reveal to you their blueprint. In other words, which needs are most important to them and their beliefs about how to meet them. So if you say, well, tell me what you really want, and the person says, well, gosh, I want to get control of my life. I'm just tired of feeling like I'm out of control. I never know what's going to happen. It's always changing. I want more security in my life. I'm tired of being out of control. Then what are they after? They're after the need of certainty. Their belief is the way to get it is through the value of controlling things. That's their model of the world. That's their blueprint. And right now, their life conditions don't match their blueprint. So you begin to understand what they're after. And now you can begin to assist them because you know what the target is. You know what they're going after. You can also predict what their problems are. Somebody's always trying to be in control of something. What could you predict would be their problem? Well, the problem is they're always going to be stressed because you can't control everything. You can't control the weather. You can influence other people, but you can't control them. Your kids are still going to make their own choices at times. You can influence them again, but you're not going to always control it. We know that in our hearts if we're honest with ourselves. So somebody's trying to control everything is going to be stressed all the time because their model produces stress. That blueprint will equal stress a good portion of the time. Does this give you some kind of insight? Again, I'm not going to go through this in total detail. We'll walk through this later, but that's the first thing you got to know. Know what's driving the game. Know what they need, know what they want. Now, the second thing you got to know is what's preventing them from getting it. That's the second thing you got to know. What's getting in the way? And we've already described what that is. There are two things that keep people from getting what they want. Number one is the state they're in. Have you ever been in a place where, you can't come up with the answer? You can't even remember a word like how to spell a difficult word like the, or your home telephone number or address? Why don't you know the answer? What's getting in the way? You're in a lousy state. You're in a stupid state. A few minutes later, I remember. I remember my email. I remember my phone number. I remember how to spell that word. Haven't you been in those places where the state you're in kept you from getting what you want? So sometimes people they can't get to feeling love because they're so angry. It's a pattern of focus. It's a pattern of language that makes them angry. So we can change that person's pattern and suddenly they'll feel significant. They'll feel loved. They'll feel connected. Or the second thing that affects getting what they want might be their beliefs or the emotional pattern that they get into most often. That's their model of the world. So if you want to make a change with somebody, first you got to know what it is they want and need, and that'll tell you a lot. Second is you got to know what's preventing them from getting there. What belief system? What mindset? What way of using their body that's putting them in a state where they can't come up with the answer? What focus is keeping them from getting there? What language patterns? What's preventing them? And then finally, number three, you got to be able to understand how to get them to where they want to be. How do you get them to change their life conditions or change their blueprint? And to do that, I've refined 7 simple master steps to changing anybody. Now, where do these come from? Well, they came from my life experience. I remember very early in my life, I started studying Ericksonian patterns and, NLP and Gestalt and all these different approaches. And I remember I went through, one of these classes, for example, in NLP, and I learned from John Grinder, one of the co-founders of NLP. He was a brilliant, brilliant man. And I got a chance to witness his work and learn from him. But after the first 4 days of learning in the 6-month program, I was on fire. Because, at the end of each day, I would write down everything he said, every metaphor, every story, every example, every distinction that he made, anything I learned. I made myself pull it back out of my head. And then I try to find a way to organize it. Because it was all these gems, but there was no structure to it. It was like I was learning all these tools. And I thought, if you want to get a result, you can teach a dog new tricks. He was teaching me these great tricks on how to produce a result. But what I was interested in is knowing why they worked. And so interestingly enough, I came out of his programs and I was on fire. And I would turn to people in the class. In those days, it was mostly marriage and family counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. And I wasn't any of those things. I was just a guy that wanted to help people. So after the first 4 days of learning how we could help people to, for example, wipe out a lifetime phobia in less than an hour, something that traditionally could take years to do, I turned to these psychologists and psychiatrists and I said, hey guys, let's go find some phobics and cure them. And they're all looking at me like, you're obviously not an educated man. This is a 6-month training. You got to go through all 6 months and then you got to be tested in these things. And if you pass the testing, then you get certified. And then once you're certified, you can do this. And I thought, what are you talking about? I'm a business guy. You don't wait for someone to certify you before you go do something. So I said, I want to help somebody tonight. And it was 11 o'clock at night in Los Angeles, California. We were staying at the Holiday Inn there doing a class off Century Boulevard, right around the corner from the airport. And I thought, where do you go at 11 o'clock at night to help somebody? Where do you find somebody who needs help at 11 o'clock at night in Los Angeles? And I thought, Denny's. I would get anybody at Denny's at 11 o'clock at night needs help. So that's where I started. Literally, I went down the street. It was only a block away. Went into Denny's, found this poor old man crunched over, the counter there. And I went up to him, sir, tell me what it is you need. What is it you want? What do you need to change? I have the ability to change anything. And I got, completely over the top and I'm smacking my chest and being all excited. And I learned very quickly this is not the best approach. So I went up to Canada, to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and that's where I started my career. In fact, it's kind of ironic. That's where I am right now in a studio talking to you. And so the way I built it was by challenging people. Actually, originally, challenging traditional psychologists and psychiatrists and saying, listen, if you think what I'm saying is an exaggeration, bring me one of your patients. I do these free guest events. Come, I'll do a demonstration on stage. Bring me one of the patients you've never been able to cure. That was my standard tool. It happened by accident. I was on a radio show and this psychiatrist called up and started attacking me. And, I said, sir, you never met me. You never met any of my clients. You're calling me a liar and a charlatan. And I basically developed a technique of entrapping him into having to basically put up or shut up. And so for the first, 6, 9, 10 months of me doing this, that was my signature. I was going to conquer these psychologists and show them, how this work could be done so much better. And fortunately, I wasn't successful all the time, but I was always successful publicly. So that was very helpful and encouraged me enormously. And I made a lot of distinctions. But the real value was I was making all these changes happen. And so I got a lot of attention, including John Grinder's, and people are saying, how is he doing this? He's using the same techniques we're doing. How is he producing these changes so powerfully, so quickly? I took people who had been stuttering. No one taught me how to stop stuttering, but I figured out the pattern. It took me several hours. I was sweating. I began to wonder if I could pull it off, but I began to realize, look, this person only stutters when they get in certain states. They didn't stutter on every word. They didn't stutter every situation. When they got scared, they stuttered. When they thought of certain words, they stuttered. And so I started watching the body. I said, stuttering is a state. And I began to see that when this person stuttered, sure enough, they changed their physical body. They would, for example, they'd take a big breath in, and then they'd start to try to talk, but not release the air. And all this pressure would build up in their body, and all of a sudden, all the air would come out at once, and sure enough, they'd stutter. Or they'd try to start talking without taking any air in. So there was no air going through their voice box. And then they'd suck in the air and shove out all this air. And sure enough, again, they'd stutter. So I realized they were stopping the flow of the air through the voice box. So I'd say to this person, listen, I want you to sing that word, shout that word, the word they normally stumble on. And they couldn't stutter. So then now that you had quite an interesting pattern erupt because I'd say stutter and they couldn't do it. And so now I had this cool technique. So I kept creating all these different approaches. But what was interesting was I began to look at to see what was it I was doing that was helping me succeed that was different. Part of it was a mindset, that's for sure, a passion and intensity. But the other part of it was I had a sequence of things I did. What I found is ideally, in trying to create an impact on somebody's life and trying to influence them for a greater good, there's a sequence of things that are important to go through to have that impact. If you step out of the sequence, it's okay, but you tend to have the most power if you follow this sequence. So what is the first one? Step one is understand and appreciate their world. That's the first step in the 7 master steps of changing anyone. Why is this the first one? Well, because if you're trying to influence somebody and you don't understand what drives them, what they want, what they fear, what excites them, what they value, what their rules are, you're basically flying blind. Plus, you're just basically generally trying to probably influence them the way you would be influenced. Well, if the person's just like you, that'll work fine. But if you're a person who's going to be a leader, you have to be able to reach people that aren't like you. To do that, you got to enter their world. Remember the principle I said earlier? I'll say it again and again because repetition is the mother of skill. To influence another person, you have to know what already influences them. So in this first step of understanding and appreciating somebody's world, notice I didn't say label and judge them, right? Because the minute you judge somebody, you can't influence them because they feel that judgment. What makes people feel safe is to feel that you appreciate them. You're sincerely interested. That's what opens them. Not that you want to hear enough to label them. So what do we want to appreciate? What do we want to understand about their world? We want to appreciate and understand, number one, what needs are driving them. We want to know the why behind their behavior. Oftentimes you see people doing things and you think they're doing it for a certain reason, but everybody does things for different reasons. There's only 6 primary reasons, 6 needs. But assuming that, for example, somebody contributed money because they wanted to make a contribution isn't always true. Sometimes people donate money because they want significance. They want their name on the door. Or they made a contribution because they feel guilty and they want to feel comfortable about their life again because they have all this money and they didn't have to earn it. So it gives them comfort and certainty to be able to give it away. Everybody does things for different reasons. Does that make sense? So we want to know what's driving this person so we can help them. What are those top 2 needs? What's driving them most? That was the first thing we want to know. It's the first step here also. What else do we want to know to appreciate and understand their world? Well, we want to understand what do they believe life's about. Again, tomorrow's session, we're going to take the entire session and focus on just this first step. It's that important. I'm going to walk you through all the different types of beliefs. I think you'll find it really fun because you can ask yourself the questions. Questions like, who are my role models growing up? Do you think that somebody's decisions, their life, the way they approach things would be different if their role model in life was, let's say, Mother Teresa, or if it was Osama bin Laden? That's not a hard one to figure out. If you find out what people believe, what they value, what's most important about them, the more you understand about the world, the greater the chances you can enter the world and you can help to lead them and influence them for a positive good. So this first step was, by the way, the first thing I did with Bob. Remember Bob, the man who wanted to kill himself and his kids? Instead of just deciding, oh my God, this is a horrible person, I decided I needed to understand and appreciate his world. And because I stayed curious and got underneath it, I found out that this is not a bad man. This isn't a mean man. He's certainly about to do something that'd be unbelievably destructive and painful for everybody, something unconscionable. But instead of judging it, or I couldn't influence him and judging him, I want to understand him. I want to not just understand him intellectually, I want to appreciate his feelings. And when I got into Bob, and I started to understand that Bob's life was about freedom, Bob's life was about having fun, Bob's life was being fully alive and living passionately, Bob and I started to feel a connection. And all of a sudden, I'm vested in Bob, and Bob can feel that. Do you think that increases my chances of influencing him as opposed to just being some outsider looking in on him and deciding what's wrong with him and I'm going to fix him? See, I never believe that there's anybody that's broken. No one's broken. I'm not here to fix them. If you do that mentality, then you create this holier-than-thou approach that some therapists do, some business leaders do, some parents do, some friends do, and I'm going to tell you one thing. It's going to limit who you can reach. Only people that feel inferior are going to respond to you. But if you can really feel for that person and understand that person, all of a sudden I'm starting to say, wait a second, I got a different picture of Bob. I understand Bob's world. I can understand why Bob feels dead inside. And as that understanding starts to grow in you, now your capacity to make a difference is going to grow with it. The other thing you have to understand about somebody's world is that people were all part of a tribe. One way of describing human beings is that we really are the result of all the relationships we've had, all the people we've met and interacted with in our lives. We're part of a tribe. We impact the tribe. We influence other people, and we're influenced by them. So the more you can understand about the context in which somebody lives, are they the third child that everybody's looked down on? Are they the first son that everyone demanded the most from? What was the mindset? Do they have a parent that is all controlling growing up? Now, this is not so you have to go live in their past, but if you can understand the context in which they've grown up or the context in which they live now, they're a lawyer. So every day of their life, they go and they put somebody on the stand, and their job is to break them. And it's not hard to figure out, if you understand that context, why they might have trouble in their personal relationships, because all day long they're reinforced for a behavior and they go home and put their spouse on the stand. So the more you understand about someone's environment, their context, what they get rewarded for, what they get punished for in the environment they live in, the more you're also going to understand how to influence them effectively. And by the way, when we're talking about understanding and appreciating somebody's world, we're not talking about doing this as if this person is someone you're studying from a foreign culture or someone you're looking down your nose at or categorizing. What will make this relationship work? When you look at therapy, a lot of different studies have tried to take different therapies and see which one's most effective. And, some studies will promote one approach and another will promote another. But in reality, research again and again and again shows the most important factor in somebody feeling like they can really change their life is that the person they work with, the coach, the mentor, the therapist, the manager, the leader they work with, they have a great relationship with, they have rapport with. So one of the most important things here is to create a base in your relationship up front that you're not asking these questions so you can just manipulate them, but to find a way to meet their needs. If you can establish that while you're discovering what somebody wants and what they need, while you're understanding their world, I can promise you, going to the next step where you're going to begin to start the change process will move much more smoothly. Change will happen much more easily. So what is step 2 of the 7 master steps? Okay, you understand the person's world. You understand what's driving them. You understand what's going on. Let's use Bob as the example. Go, my goodness, this man, he really is a good soul. He feels like he has failed as a man. He doesn't have work. He doesn't support his family. He's not producing the result. His family is suffering. He has no reason to live. He's got to go. That's his belief system because he has no meaning. He's insignificant. He's disconnected. In fact, to give you some background, I found out later on, his wife didn't know about this plan, obviously. She, in fact, when he was coming to the seminar, thought, oh boy, all she knew is he hadn't worked for 3 years. He wouldn't talk to the children. He barely talked to her. When friends would come over, he wouldn't come out of the room. And she figured, well, maybe if he goes and drinks Kool-Aid with some guru guy at a seminar, maybe that'll do it. I'll try anything to get him going. So she encouraged him to go for that reason. She had no clue what was going on. So what do you do with a guy like Bob once you understand his world? Well, you got to help him to change. What is the ultimate tool that makes change possible? Leverage. Step 2 is you got to get leverage. Now, what does that mean? Leverage, well, think about what a lever does, or a lever, as they say in Great Britain. What a lever does, what leverage does, is it allows you, with a small amount of effort, to move something that seems impossible to move. I can move this boulder if I put the lever in the right place in the right way. With just a little bit of effort, I can move this giant immovable item. Well, leverage in a human being comes when a human being moves from this should change to this must change. Everybody's got a list of shoulds. I should lose some weight. I should follow through. I should spend more time with my kids. Everybody's got the should list. I should make more calls at work. But most people don't actually change. They just what I call should all over themselves. And you don't want to should all over yourself. That doesn't make anything better. But when something's a must, there's something about human beings. When it's a must for them, not everyone else says it's a must, but there's a point in you. Have you ever had this happen? A point where you keep talking about changing something, you keep saying you got to do it, and you start and stop and you don't follow through. And then one day you finally go, that's it. No more. This is changing now. I am not going to spend one more day this way. And you suddenly go out and you start your run or your walk, or you join the gym and you really follow through, or you go on the diet, or, you might go, this is enough. I'm not going to live this way. I'm not going to put up with this. And you leave that job or that environment, or you confront that person, or you confront yourself. Or maybe, have you ever had this happen? Ever been in a relationship way too long? You know what I'm talking about? Where it's not right, but you keep saying it should change, but you don't have the guts to do it. Or you keep telling yourself, well, it'll get better in the future. Leverage happens when you get to the point where your brain and body become one and you go, this is it, no more. It's when you hit an emotional threshold. It's where change is no longer an option. It's where all of a sudden failing to change in your mind is much more painful than the fear of changing and it not working, or feeling like a failure, or the uncertainty of change. See, most people don't change because, even though they're unhappy, what they're doing meets some of their needs. Let's say somebody smokes cigarettes and they know, oh my God, it's a terrible habit and I could get cancer and I'm coughing a lot and everything else, but it meets some of your needs. When you smoke cigarettes, you feel certainty and comfort from taking that deep breath in like we talked about. You get the chance to change your state if you're all stressed out, and all of a sudden you go out and you smoke a cigarette. It totally changes your state, creates variety. It's kind of taking time for yourself. You go out and smoke and you're connecting with yourself. And what do we learn in the last session? Well, anytime something you do meets at least 3 of your needs, it becomes an addiction. So all of a sudden you do this again and again. Why would someone want to stop? Well, maybe it's, on the one hand, it makes you feel comfortable, but on the other, you have some uncertainty because now you're coughing a lot. You don't feel good. Or maybe you're in a relationship with somebody and they hate cigarettes. They hate the smell of smoke. It disgusts them, and you love them and you don't want to lose their love. Now there's some leverage. Now there's a cost. Now you can lose some of your needs if you don't make a change. But, a lot of people kind of coast along and say, I'm going to change. They don't until they hit this point of leverage, this emotional threshold. Where does this happen in your life? Again, go back to relationship. You ever been in a relationship and kept saying you're going to change, and finally one day you said, that's it. Not another day, not another hour. It's been painful in the past. It's painful right now. It's going to be painful in the future. This is over. And you finally took action. Has that ever happened to you? Where's an area where you finally made a change? Did you ever smoke cigarettes? Did you finally stop one day, even though you tried many other times? What finally got you to stop? Leverage. Somewhere you linked up in your head that failing to change equals massive, immediate, unbearable pain, or a level of pain you weren't willing to settle for anymore. Or, man, by changing now, I'm going to get massive, amazing, extraordinary levels of pleasure. We all function this way. So leverage is power, but what's leverage is different for different people. See, some people leverage is, if you don't stop doing this, you're off this team. Right? The people who don't want to lose being on the team, they don't want to be part of that group. So they hate it, but they make the change. Other people, if you threaten them like that, to them, to comply with you is to give up their identity. They value having their own choices more than you telling them, and they'll leave the team. Do you get the metaphor? How do you know what leverage is going to work? How do you know what's going to push somebody over the edge? You try different things. You know what the outcome is, and you try some. If it doesn't work, you change your approach. That's what I do. And you'll see many examples of this in our Inner Strength films if you have an interest, and you'll also see them at the end of this program on our DVD. But what I will tell you is, if you know which of the 6 human needs a person values most, what are their top 2, which I call their driving force, then you know where the most leverage is. Someone who values significance, if they can associate that if I continue this, I'm going to lose significance, I'm going to look like I'm less than, they'll change in a heartbeat. If they value love, and they think if I don't change now, if they get in their body, failing to change now is going to cost me love, they'll change in a heartbeat. If they value certainty, and you feel like they're going to lose control, lose certainty if they don't make this change, they'll change in a heartbeat. So if you want a shortcut to finding the best leverage, look for what need structure they value most and relate the leverage to that. Here, I'll give you a dramatic example. I had another seminar one time, and I found out again there was a gentleman in the seminar, different situation. His name is Jim. In fact, we made a movie of this, a film of this. So if you're a therapist, you can actually get credits for watching it and following through and learning the distinctions on it. But Jim was this sweet, sweet man. He stood up, and he was emotionally broke. And what I mean by that is, the guy was on his last leg. He came to the seminar kind of as his last approach, seeing if there's anything he could do to make his life work. And he was suicidal. I'm using a suicide example again because they're the most dramatic, as you might guess. So if you can do this with somebody who's suicidal, you can obviously do it with somebody who's frustrated or overwhelmed or feeling depressed. So my point is, with Jim, I found out where he was. I started talking to him from the front of the room, and here was Jim's model of the world. Jim's entire life was about contribution. He wanted to be significant enough in his life that he would be loved, and the way to do that was significantly succeed in business, be a really successful businessman, make a lot of money, but don't just make it for yourself. Donate that money and make a difference for other people so they'll love you. So be significant, contribute, so you'll get love. Kind of follow the need structure? So what's the problem with that? Well, nothing. Jim was a very driven man, very smart man. So in a 12-year period of time, he built up a $24 million a year business. Pretty darn good from scratch. Did it with a couple of small partners. And Jim, though, along the way, his greatest pride was not only was the successful Orange County businessman, but that he took a significant amount of his profits and he donated to people that were in a handicapped situation. So here's this beautiful man, a giver, somebody who's trying to contribute. He's just a little love bug, just wanted love. So P.S. what happens? Well, in the late 90s, when the Internet 1.0 was going strong and the stock market was going crazy, Jim took some of the money he made and he started to invest. And he was getting extraordinary returns, sometimes as much as 10 or 20 or 30% in a month. He was doing leverage types of investments, a lot of options, and just making a fortune on the side, not out of his business, just from his investments. And so his sister-in-law pulled him aside and said, look, you got to take our money and invest it for us. And Jim said, well, look, I'm not a professional investor. He said, I'm doing well right now, but I wouldn't want to invest your money. What if I lost the money? She said, you're not losing money. You're making a fortune. We could never make this kind of money. He said, well, I have, a stockbroker. I could turn you over to him. They said, no. You are making the decisions. Please do this for us. So framed as a gift, as a contribution, this appealed to Jim. So he said, okay, he got to be the hero. So he took all this money and he invested in it and they succeeded. So then they wanted to give him more until he pretty much had given Jim their entire nest egg. Jim, of course, put it right beside his own investments. He didn't do anything differently. He didn't touch that money for himself. And then one day, all hell broke loose. And what happened? Well, when Jim told me the story, he looked like a crushed soul. He's bawling uncontrollably, crying. What occurred? Well, Jim said, I was gone busy on my business for 3 or 4 days. And he said, I told my stockbroker that we needed to start taking some off the table and being a bit more conservative. And he said, but he felt really confident, so he put me in 7 positions. And he said they were all option positions. Now, if you're not familiar with options, if you buy stock and the company goes to zero, you lose all your money. But if you buy options and the stock goes down, you don't just lose your money, you end up owing money. And in one day, he wiped out everything Jim had accumulated in his lifetime, all of his investments, all of his cash, and worst of all of the money that he'd been investing that came from his sister-in-law. Now, you can only imagine Jim's fear and anxiety and frustration and insanity that he was feeling inside. And so, a long story shortened, it got to the point where Jim lost everything. He lost his business. He lost his home. He went through a divorce. I mean, it was the worst experience he could ever dream of in his life. Completely broken. He had no way to contribute economically anymore to the Handicapped Association. And so when I met Jim, he had finally figured out a plan. He hadn't told anybody, but it got uncovered. What was his plan? Oh, different than Bob's. He wasn't going to kill his kids or anything of that nature. He was going to kill himself. Why? Not only because he felt broken, but because he felt like he couldn't solve this. Remember, when your life conditions don't equal your blueprint and you feel like you have no control to make it better, when you feel helpless, people suffer. And his suffering got so bad that he decided the way to make an ultimate contribution would be to sacrifice his life. And as I dug in with him on this, and you can watch this on film as it unfolds live if you ever want to see this, interestingly enough, his belief system was, I have an insurance policy. So while I'll be dead, my sister-in-law will finally have her life savings back. Everyone else will be taken care of. Instead of being a failure in life, my life will have served. Well, as I brought back to Jim and began to refocus him, I said, Jim, can you imagine what this would do to your sister-in-law for her to feel that you took your own life, that you somehow thought that money was more important to her than you? And he said, look, I know I'm important to her. He said, but frankly, at this stage, the money's even more important. And you could see in his face all the pain of what people had said to him and how they felt like he had failed them and how they blamed him. And so almost nothing I could do, even though I understood his world, I hadn't found the way to leverage him. I thought, caring for his family, the hurt that his mother would feel to know that he died and killed himself, the hurt that he would do to other people. None of that was enough because his pain in the moment of feeling like he'd not contributed and that he hurt everybody was much worse than maybe they'll feel bad when I die in his mind. I wasn't able to find leverage until one point in time where I had to make change a must for him, where he couldn't use this plan. I looked at him and I said, well, frankly, Jim, if you're going to be so selfish that all you're going to focus is on how to meet your needs so you can feel significant by dying and not caring about what it does to your mother or anybody else, and you're going to rationalize escaping your pain by killing yourself. I said, you know what? I don't know what happens on the other side to anybody, and I don't know what you believe. Whatever you believe, who knows what happens to someone who takes their own life? But I said, I know one thing. I said, if you do it, no money's going to be paid. And he looked at me in shock and said, what do you mean? I have a life insurance policy. I said, I know. But I said, every life insurance policy has a clause. In that clause, if you take your life deliberately, there is no payout. And I said, you're on videotape right now. This entire session is being filmed. And I said, if you go take your life, I'm going to send the videotape to the insurance company and no one's going to get a dime. And the look on his face, I mean, he was ready to explode. He said, well, you, I don't give you the right to do that. I said, well, I don't really think you have any authority over me, do you? And there was this moment, this intense moment where the leverage was there and I deployed it and he had no choice. We just wiped it out. If he goes and takes his life, he doesn't accomplish any of his needs. His life is not significant. No one's taken care of. It's over, baby. You're going to have to sit here and face the music and find a better alternative. So sometimes leverage is physical. Sometimes leverage is, people will do things for others they care about that they'll never do for themselves. Everyone has different leverage. That's why understanding their world is so important. I remember I worked one time with a woman who was in such bad shape. She had these physical intestinal problems. She was stressed all the time. She was in a marriage where she was so unhappy. And I got her to see where the problems were and the changes she had to make and her beliefs and her blueprint. But she kept saying to me, I can't do it. I can't do it. So I kept looking for leverage. And I knew that this woman was, totally committed to health. She was a raw fooder, but she was ill all the time because you can eat perfectly. And if you sit around being stressed all the time, nothing digests right, nothing assimilates. You're not healthy. And I knew the love of her life was her daughter. She didn't have love with her husband, but boy, she loved her daughter. So I went to her and I said, look, if you continue down this line, how old do you think a person who thinks this way, who acts this way, who believes the things you believe, how long do you think they'll live to be? And she told me an age. I don't remember the age, but it was about 4 or 5 years older than she was right then. And I thought, now she's going to change. She's associated to the fact that if I don't change, I'm going to die. She goes, I still can't change. I said, okay, I got to pull out the big leverage. I have a belief system that says, I'll do whatever it takes to help someone break their pattern, help them change. I'll look for it because my view is if, you really love somebody and you care for them and you find out that they're in a burning building, would you just say, gosh, I hope they get out? I mean, if you care about them, you'd find a way to burst up there and wake them up, assuming they're asleep in the building. And what if you go to the door and the building's burning and you bang on the door and they're one of those kind of people that sleeps real heavy? Would you go, well, gosh, I gave it my best shot. I banged on the door and then leave? Of course not. What would you do if you really love that person and they're in a burning building and they're asleep in that room? You kick the door down. You do whatever it takes. You get help. What if you knock the door down and now you're going to help this person and they're one of those kind of people that doesn't wake up real well? My little sister was like that. You woke her up in the morning, it was a dangerous sport. You might get punched, hit. It was not a good thing. So what if you try to wake them up and a person tries to hurt you? You go, fine, I tried to help them. They're smacking me, fine. They're just going to burn. Of course not. If you love them, you knock them on the head if you have to. Knock them out, put them on your back, and drag them out of the building because sooner or later, what's going to happen? One day they're going to wake up and go, thank you. They're going to get out of the building and say, oh my God, you saved my life. Well, I'm willing to do anything. So I know sometimes the only reason people haven't changed is you haven't found strong enough leverage. If you've been trying to get yourself to do something, yeah, you want to change for one reason, but hey, it meets some of your other needs. Leverage is the key. You need more leverage. You need me to change a must. So I thought, okay, I got to bring out the big guns. So I said to her, Lisa was her name. I said, Lisa, if you continue this way, then you believe you'll die in a few years? She goes, I know. I didn't tell her she'd die. She said it. I'd never say to someone, you're going to die if you keep this up. I don't think anybody has the right to do that. Nobody knows. But she said it. So if she said it's true to her. So I said, well, okay. And you can't change, huh? She goes, oh, I can't change. It's just the way it is. I said, well, then when you die and your daughter is carrying your body, she's one of the pallbearers, will she hate you knowing you could have changed and didn't, or will she just forget you? Ooh, I thought, oh man, I hate doing this, but got to do whatever it takes, right? You got to step in. And there's this long pause, and she started to cry, and I thought, okay, now she'll do whatever it takes to change. Because once it's a must, we find the way. So I thought at this point, man, I got Lisa. She's crying. She's going to change. We got the leverage here. But guess what? She goes, I know, but I still can't change. I can't do it. I can't. She's crying. And I had this moment in my head, I'll never forget. I thought, oh my God, this woman's never going to change. And I have this simple belief that if you're going to be an effective leader, an effective therapist, an effective friend or parent, you can't ever buy into the fact that you can't help this person. If you entertain that thought, you're not going to reach them. You're not going to help them. So I said, that's bull. There's always a way. That's my belief. There's always a way to reach somebody. There's leverage in everybody. You just got to find what it is. So I took a breath in for a moment. I thought, my God, there's got to be a way. And then I got it. This woman's a raw fooder. There's nothing she's more militant about is her food and her diet. So I said, I just wonder, do you think her new mom will be a meat eater? I swear to you, it was like this woman was put a rocket in her butt. Her face exploded. She goes, what? How dare it? And now she's ready to change. She's willing to let herself die. She's willing to let her kid carry the coffin, but she ain't willing to have her kid have a mother that's a meat eater. I draw the line at that. Everybody's got leverage somewhere. All you got to do is find it, but you won't find that leverage unless you do step one really well. You understand and appreciate their world. See, if I didn't know she was a raw fooder and I didn't know how militant she was on that, I never would have come up with that idea. The craziest things can change someone. Sometimes leverage is physical. Years ago, there used to be an organization that used to do the Stop Smoking Clinic. It was called the Schick Center. And I don't know if you remember them or not, if you're old enough to remember that. And they used to have this session where they proved they gave you a guarantee you'd stop smoking. You know how they did it? They put these electrodes on your face and they would shock you every time you reached for a cigarette. Well, you get enough physical leverage like that, you can change just about anybody. But the problem is these people stopped smoking and started eating or started doing something else because they hadn't found a way to meet the need. The cigarettes made them feel comfortable. They're certain. Gave them variety. Gave them connection. They needed a better way to do it. That's the value of 6 human needs. Okay, so step one, what is it? You got it. Understand and appreciate their world. Create a base of relationship. Make sure they know you're not analyzing you're there to help. 2, get leverage. Find that tipping point. Find what it is that's going to make change, not something they're talking about, they want to do, they should do, that's going to make it a must for them. And what'll make that happen? If they link up. Failing to change now means immediate, massive, unbearable pain in their world. And changing now could mean amazing, extraordinary, immediate pleasure. And the reason I say immediate is if it's going to be pleasure 10 years from now or pain 10 years from now, well, who knows what the future will have. You got to make it immediate. That's what I did. I took the future for Lisa and brought it forward. The same thing with Jim. I took the future and I took away his ability to make it happen. I leveraged him.
This session continues on the next CD.